With us now, John Bolton, a Fox News contributor and the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So, John, you know, watching Condoleezza Rice over there now, it's just like a house falling on me. How could we have gotten so far behind the curve on this?
Well, I think a lot of people missed it, not just the administration. Vladimir Putin once said the breakup of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And we should have taken him seriously, because I think history may look back at this incident in Georgia and say this was the beginning of the point of Putin trying to put together the evil empire again. When and exactly under what circumstances this invasion was going to take place, who can say? But we should have seen it was coming.
But, John, the reaction came so late. It was as though, you know, maybe this will just go away, is my sense of this. I mean, we knew this was a hot spot all along. We knew there were buildups around this area. We knew this was a point of controversy. So when they moved, why not, right out of the box, deliver a really tough message?
Well, it's an important point, because the administration's initial response was weak, slow in coming. Not until the president returned from the Olympics on Monday did we get to the right rhetorical level. And that sent Russia a very important signal, that they had surprised us, that we didn't have a plan in place, we didn't know how to react, and that gave them the confidence to finish militarily what they could have done anyway.
Okay, so they have this ceasefire. Now, I don't understand. This almost is a pretext, in my opinion, for the Russians to intimidate even further. They're allowed to use their peacekeepers, right, and move into parts of Georgia under the pretext of peacekeeping by thugs?
This is a very bad deal, and it has other aspects that are even worse, mostly letting the European Union carry out the negotiations between Russia and Georgia in the first place. This is not a case where Russia invaded Georgia with diplomats or rubles or economic goods. This is a security threat. We should be in NATO. Secretary Rice should have gone to Brussels to convene the North Atlantic Council, not let the French go to Moscow. Now she's in Georgia pushing this deal on Saakashvili that he probably has no chance to accept. But make no mistake, this lays the predicate for future Russian military action.
Okay, let's talk about leverage, John. So let's roll it back and say, okay, had we acted sooner, or even right now, what leverage do we really have over the Russians?
Well, I think the leverage we have in part demonstrates the mistake that gave the Russians the impetus to take this aggressive action, and that's when NATO, back in the spring at the Bucharest NATO summit, rejected President Bush's quite correct recommendation to put Ukraine and Georgia on the road to NATO membership. Our European friends failed that test, and sitting in Moscow, I think the Russians looked at that and said, we will have a free hand in Georgia. What we need to do is reverse that decision and make it clear that Georgia and Ukraine are going to be the next NATO members.
All right, what about, you know, the idea of not putting them in the World Trade Organization or throwing them out of the G8? Or I mean, is that leverage? Does Putin care? What makes Putin hurt is the question.
Right. I think both of those are things we ought to take a look at. Frankly, I've changed my own view on throwing Russia out of the G8. I think we've got to put this to our European friends. But that's really what the issue is. Even a strong American response is going to have to test the Europeans to see whether they're willing to be strong, too.
Okay, well, we know that our greatest allies are in Central Europe, okay, right?
Right.
You agree with that?
Right.
So, and we have some in Central Europe who are weak. So here you got these Russians invading this country, bullying them. The West appears to not have a very strong response. I don't want to say impotent, but not very strong. We wonder about our leverage. What signal does this send to our weak allies and friends who are potentially our strongest?
Well, you know, actually, the Eastern Europeans in some respects have come through. Estonia, Latvia,
yes.
Lithuania stood with Georgia. So did Poland. Poland signed the agreement finally to deploy our missile defense assets there, which then provoked the Russian threat to attack them with nuclear weapons.
What did you think of that, by the way?
Well,
I mean, this is something I'm not sure people know. Here you got a Russian military guy saying Poland might be attacked now.
Look, they've seen that the West has had a timid and insufficient response on Georgia. So given success, they're just pushing ahead. They're going to see now if they can intimidate Poland or if they can intimidate other Europeans. That's why I think the president's coming forward has been very very important. But we need to rally the Europeans, and the Europeans need to stand up to the Russians on this point.
So, John, for the average person watching this show, it's the fact that they're beginning to dominate, which is something we fought for so many years to reverse. And then we have the matter of energy, right, where the Russians have got countries by the throat, the Europeans by the throat, and we actually built a pipeline so that we could have some independence from them. Is that the significant economic side of this?
Very definitely. To get out of the Caspian Sea region, oil or natural gas, right now you have to either go through Iran or through Russia, with one exception, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, and the Russians now want dominance over that, I think.
Well, and the Russians told the Ukrainians in the middle of last winter, if you don't go with what we want, we're going to shut you off. They're turning into a bunch of thugs, John, and we got to be tough with them because that's what backs them down, in my opinion, at the end of the day. Ambassador, thanks for being with us.